The law office of Patterson and Associates occupied the third floor of a brick building in downtown Portland. I arrived 15 minutes early, as I always did for everything. The receptionist gave me a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ms. Chen? They're expecting you. Conference room B." I nodded my thanks and walked down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Through the glass walls, I could see them already assembled. My parents, David and Susan Chen. My older sister Victoria. My younger brother Marcus. Uncle Wei and Aunt Lin. They were laughing about something. I opened the door and the laughter died. "Oh," Victoria said, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rising. "You actually came?" "Of course I came," I replied quietly, taking a seat at the far end of the conference table. "Grandma passed away. This is her will reading." "Surprised you even knew she died," Marcus muttered, not quite under his breath. "Since you never visited." I folded my hands in my lap and said nothing. There was no point in explaining that I'd video called Grandma every single day for the past 3 years. That we talked for hours about everything and nothing. That she taught me Mandarin over FaceTime and I taught her how to use Instagram. They wouldn't believe me anyway. My father cleared his throat. "We weren't sure you'd get the message. You're so busy with your life in Seattle." "I got the message," I said simply. The truth was, I'd been the one who received the call from the hospice nurse. I'd been the one on the phone with Grandma in her final hours, listening to her labored breathing, telling her I loved her in both English and Mandarin. But my family didn't know that. They'd been too busy arguing about funeral arrangements to notice who was actually with her, even if only virtually. Victoria was dressed in head-to-toe black designer clothes, looking like she was attending a fashion show rather than a will reading. "Well, let's get this over with. Some of us have actual commitments." The door opened and a distinguished man in his 60s entered, carrying a leather briefcase. "Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm Robert Patterson.
I'll be executing Mrs. Chen's will today." He settled into his seat and pulled out a thick folder. My family leaned forward eagerly. I sat back, watching. "Before we begin," Mr. Patterson said, "I need to confirm everyone's identity." He went around the table, checking IDs. When he got to me, he paused. "Ah, Ms. Lauren Chen. Your grandmother spoke of you often." "Did she?" I asked softly. "Extensively," he replied, and something in his tone made Victoria's eyes narrow. Mr. Patterson returned to his seat and opened the will. "Let me start by saying that Mrs. Mei Chen was very specific about her wishes. She updated this will multiple times over the past 5 years, most recently 8 months ago." 8 months ago? My mother frowned. She was already quite ill by then. "She was," Mr. Patterson agreed. "But she was of completely sound mind. I have medical certification to that effect from 2 independent physicians." Victoria waved her hand impatiently. "Can we just get to it? What did she leave to whom?" Mr. Patterson gave her a cool look. "Very well. Mrs. Chen's estate consists primarily of real property, specifically 9 rental properties in the Portland area, with a combined assessed value of approximately $4.2 million. The room went silent. I'd known about the properties, of course. Grandma had told me about each one, sharing stories of how she and Grandpa had built their portfolio from nothing, 2 immigrants working 3 jobs each to buy their first duplex in 1975. 9 properties. My father breathed. "I knew about 5, but 9? "Your mother was a shrewd businesswoman," Mr. Patterson said. "She acquired the last 4 properties over the past decade. All are income-generating, fully rented, and professionally managed." Victoria's eyes were gleaming. "So, we divide them 3 ways? 3 for me, 3 for Marcus, 3 for Lauren." "Not exactly," Mr. Patterson said. "What do you mean, not exactly?" Victoria's voice rose. "We're her grandchildren. That's how inheritance works." Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Chen left very specific instructions. She wanted me to read you a letter first." He pulled out an envelope. "This is in her own handwriting." "Just tell us who gets what," Marcus said impatiently. "The letter is part of the will," Mr. Patterson said firmly. Mrs. Chen insisted it be read aloud, in full, before any distribution is discussed. He opened the envelope and began to read. My dear family, if you're hearing this, I am gone. I hope you gave me a good funeral.
I hope you said kind things about me.
I hope you remembered that I loved you all, even when you made it difficult. I have thought long and hard about what to do with the properties your grandfather and I built. These 9 buildings represent 50 years of work. 50 years of sacrifice. Of saving every penny. Of fixing broken toilets at midnight and dealing with difficult tenants and learning a business in a language we barely spoke. I have watched each of you carefully over the past 5 years. I have seen who you are when you think no one is watching. I have seen what you value and who you value it for. Victoria, you visited me twice in the past 3 years. Both times you asked about the properties. Asked when I was going to downsize and simplify my estate. You never asked how I was feeling. You never asked about my life. Marcus, you called me every few months. Always with the same question. Did I need help managing my assets? You offered many times to take over the properties to relieve me of the burden. You never asked about my book club or my garden or my friends. David and Susan, you are good children to me. But you raised Victoria and Marcus to see me as a bank. Every conversation became about money, about property, about what I would leave behind instead of what I was living now. And then there is Lauren. Lauren, who moved to Seattle 7 years ago and broke my heart a little. Lauren, who everyone said abandoned the family. Lauren, who stopped coming to dinners because Victoria made her cry and Marcus made her feel small. But Lauren, who called me every single day. Who learned Mandarin so we could talk in my first language when I was tired. Who sent me pictures of her life and asked about mine. Who remembered every story I told and asked to hear them again. Who loved me, not what I had. So, I made a choice. Mr. Patterson paused, and I could feel every eye in the room on me. My heart was pounding. What choice? Victoria demanded. What did she do? Mr. Patterson continued reading. In 2019, I transferred all 9 properties into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of that trust is Lauren May Chen, my youngest grandchild, and the only one who saw me as a person instead of a portfolio. To Victoria and Marcus, I leave my jewelry and my furniture. These items have sentimental value and should sell for approximately $30,000 combined. Use this money however you wish. To my son David and his wife Susan, I leave my blessing and my love. You will understand why I made this choice, even if it hurts. To Lauren, I leave everything else. The properties. The rental income. The future. I am not being cruel. I am being honest. You reap what you sow, and I watched for 5 years what each of you planted. Love, Grandma. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Victoria exploded. That's bullshit. She slammed her hand on the table. She was senile. This isn't legal. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. You manipulated her. You poisoned her against us. Miss Chen, Mr. Patterson said calmly, your grandmother was examined by 2 independent physicians before executing these transfers. Both certified her mental competency. The transfers are legal, binding, and irrevocable. I don't believe this, Marcus said, his face pale. 9 properties? All of them? To her? Yes, Mr. Patterson confirmed. He pulled out another folder. Here are the trust documents, filed with the county recorder in June 2019. All 9 properties legally transferred to the Lauren M. Chen Irrevocable Trust. He laid them out one by one. Each deed, each transfer document, each notarized signature. The Hawthorne Avenue duplex. The Division Street fourplex. The Belmont Commercial Building. The Alberta Street Apartments. The Woodstock Family Home. The Selwood Rental House. The Morrison Triplex. The Foster Powell Corner lot with 2 houses. The Jade District Mixed-Use Building. All 9. All mine. My mother was crying silently. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years. Uncle Wei and Aunt Lin sat frozen in shock. But Victoria was just getting started. This is what you get, she hissed at me, her face twisted with rage. This is what you deserve for cutting us off, for abandoning your family, for moving away and acting like you're too good for us." "I didn't abandon anyone," I said quietly. "You left," Victoria screamed. "You moved to Seattle and stopped coming to family dinners and made Grandma think we didn't care about her." "I stopped coming to family dinners because you bullied me at every single one," I said, my voice still calm but harder now. "Because Marcus criticized every choice I made. Because you all made it clear I didn't fit your vision of what a Chen should be." "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I looked at her directly. "Mom, when was the last time you asked about my job without suggesting I should quit and work for Dad's company instead? When did you ask about my life without comparing it to Victoria's?" She had no answer. "And I didn't make Grandma think anything," I continued. "I called her every single day. FaceTime, every morning at 8 a.m. before work. We talked for an hour, sometimes two, about everything. Her stories from China, her life in America, her friends, her concerns, her joys. Everything." "That's a lie," Marcus said flatly. I pulled out my phone and opened my call history. "Would you like to see?" 1,095 consecutive days of FaceTime calls. That's 3 years, Marcus. 3 years of daily calls. Never missed once. I turned the screen toward them. The evidence was irrefutable. Call after call after call, each one lasting 60 to 120 minutes. "You could have faked that," Victoria said desperately. "Why would I?" I asked. "Why would I fake calling someone I loved? The better question is, why didn't you actually call her?" Victoria's face went red. "I was busy. I have a career, a life." "So do I interrupted. "I have a career, a demanding one. But I made time. Every single day. Because she mattered more than being busy." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "There's more. Mrs. Chen also requested a financial audit of the property's management over the past 5 years. She asked me to review the accounts before the will reading." "Why?" my father asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "Because," Mr. Patterson said, pulling out yet another folder, "there are significant discrepancies in the reported rental income versus the actual collected income." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What kind of discrepancies?" Uncle Wei asked nervously. "The 9 properties generate approximately $14,500 in monthly rental income," Mr. Patterson said. "That's $174,000 annually. However, the reported income to Mrs. Chen averaged only $98,000 annually over the past 5 years. The difference, approximately $380,000, appears to have been diverted." "Diverted where?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew. Mr. Patterson looked at Victoria and Marcus. The properties were being managed by various family members. Ms. Victoria Chen managed 4 properties. Mr. Marcus Chen managed 3. Your parents managed 2. We were doing Grandma a favor, Victoria protested. She couldn't handle them herself anymore. "The management agreements you signed," Mr. Patterson continued calmly, "specified that you would receive a 10% management fee. Instead, it appears you are keeping approximately 44% of rental income across all properties." My father had gone gray. "That's not possible. We would never." "I have bank records," Mr. Patterson interrupted gently but firmly. "Rent checks deposited to personal accounts. Cash payments never reported. Tenants paying one amount while Mrs. Chen's statements showed another. It's all documented." "You are stealing from Grandma," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "For 5 years. While she trusted you." "We weren't stealing," Marcus shouted. "We were working. Managing tenants, handling repairs, dealing with problems. We deserved that money." "You deserved your 10% management fee," I said coldly. "Not 44%. The difference is theft." "This is insane," Victoria said, standing abruptly. "I'm not sitting here listening to this. Mom, Dad, we're leaving. We'll fight this. We'll sue. There's no way this holds up in court." "Sit down," Mr. Patterson said, and his tone made it a command, not a request. We're not finished. Victoria slowly sat back down, her hands trembling with rage. Mrs. Chen knew about the missing income, Mr. Patterson continued. She knew for at least 2 years before her death. She hired a private investigator to track where the money was going. She what? My mother whispered. She had you all followed. Your expenses tracked. Your bank deposits monitored. She documented everything. He pulled out a thick report. Victoria, you purchased a BMW in 2021 with cash. $47,000. Where did that money come from? Victoria said nothing. Marcus, you took 3 trips to Vegas in 2022. High roller suites, expensive restaurants. Total expenses approximately $35,000. On a salary of $52,000 per year, how did you afford that? Marcus stared at the table. David and Susan, you renovated your kitchen last year. Top-of-the-line appliances, custom cabinets. The contractor's invoice was $78,000. You told your friends you'd been saving for years, but your bank records show no such savings. Instead, they show regular cash deposits that match the missing rental income from the 2 properties you managed. My mother was openly crying now. My father looked like he might be sick. Grandma knew, I said softly, understanding washing over me. She knew everything, and she was gathering evidence. For what purpose? Uncle Wei asked quietly. Mr. Patterson looked at me. Mrs. Chen left instructions. She said if the family accepted the will gracefully, we would say nothing about the financial irregularities. But if anyone contested the will or made accusations against Lauren, I was to turn all evidence over to the authorities and recommend criminal prosecution for embezzlement. The room went dead silent. You're blackmailing us, Victoria said, her voice shaking.
No, I said.
Grandma is protecting me. From beyond the grave. Mr. Patterson nodded. Mrs. Chen was very clear. She said her family had a choice. Accept the will with grace, or face the consequences of their actions. There is no third option. This isn't fair, Marcus said weakly. Fair? I repeated, my voice finally showing anger. You stole from an elderly woman for 5 years. You treated her like a bank account. You ignored her until you wanted something. And you have the audacity to talk about fair? We're still family, my mother pleaded. Lauren, please. Don't let it end like this. I didn't end anything, I said, standing up. You all did. Years ago. When you made it clear I didn't matter unless I conformed. When you criticized every choice I made. When you made family gatherings so toxic, I had to leave for my own mental health. We didn't mean, she started. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant every word, every comparison to Victoria, every suggestion that my job wasn't good enough, my life wasn't impressive enough, my choices weren't acceptable enough. You meant all of it. I turned to Mr. Patterson. What do I need to sign? He slid several documents across the table. These transfer the trust properties into your direct control. You'll also need to meet with the property management company next week to discuss ongoing operations. I signed each one, my hand steady despite my racing heart. Victoria watched me with pure hatred in her eyes. You're really going to do this? Take everything. Leave us with nothing. You're getting $30,000 in jewelry and furniture, I reminded her. That's more than I got from this family in emotional support over the past 7 years. How can you be so cold? She demanded. I learned from the best, I replied, meeting her gaze. I learned from a family that measured love and property values and saw people as assets to be managed. I gathered my copies of the documents and stood. Mr. Patterson, thank you for your time. Please send any additional paperwork to my Seattle address. Of course, Miss Chen. I walked toward the door. My father called out, Lauren, wait.
Please, can we talk about this?
I paused but didn't turn around. About what, Dad? About how you stole from Grandma. About how you raised my siblings to see me as less than. About how you never once defended me when they tore me down. We love you, he said desperately. No, I said quietly. You love the idea of me. The version that stayed small and quiet and didn't challenge your authority. The daughter who would have accepted being cut out of Grandma's will without question.
But you don't love me.
You never bothered to know me well enough to love me. I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, I heard Victoria scream something, heard my mother sob, heard chairs scraping. But I didn't look back. The next 6 weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, property inspections, and family voicemails I didn't return. Victoria tried to contest the will anyway, despite Mr. Patterson's warning. The case was dismissed within 2 weeks. Grandma's documentation was too thorough, her mental competency too well established. When Victoria's lawyer filed the dismissal, Mr. Patterson called me. Miss Chen, given that your sister contested the will, your grandmother's instructions are now in effect. I'm required to turn the financial evidence over to the district attorney's office. I sat in my Seattle apartment, looking out at the rain, thinking about Grandma. Do you have to? Those were her explicit wishes, yes. I closed my eyes. Then do it. She earned the right to decide this, even after death. The investigation moved quickly. Bank records don't lie, and Grandma's PI had been thorough. Within a month, Victoria, Marcus, and my parents were all charged with embezzlement. The amounts were significant enough that prison time was possible. Victoria called me from her lawyer's office, crying and begging. I listened to the voicemail once, then deleted it. Marcus sent emails, angry ones, desperate ones, apologetic ones. I blocked his address. My parents tried a different approach. They showed up at my apartment in Seattle. I almost didn't answer the door. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe a last shred of hope, made me open it. They looked terrible. My mother had aged years and weeks. My father's hands shook as he held his hat. "Can we come in?" he asked. I should have said no. But I stepped aside and let them enter. We sat in my living room in awkward silence. Finally, my mother spoke. "We're sorry. For everything. For how we raised Victoria and Marcus. For how we treated you. For stealing from my mother. For all of it." "Okay," I said neutrally. "Okay." My father looked confused. "That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Dad? That I forgive you? That we can pretend this never happened? We want our daughter back," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "Which daughter?" I asked. "The real me, or the version you wanted me to be?" She had no answer. "Here's the truth," I said, leaning forward. "I spent 27 years trying to be enough for this family. Smart enough, successful enough, Chinese enough, American enough. I was never enough. There was always something wrong, my job, my apartment, my friends, my choices. Everything was subject to criticism and comparison. We were trying to help you. My father started. You were trying to control me," I interrupted. "There's a difference. And when I finally found the courage to set boundaries, to move away, to build a life that made me happy, you punished me for it. You made me the family's scapegoat." "We didn't mean to," my mother protested. "But you did," I said firmly. "Impact matters more than intent." And the impact was that I felt unwelcome in my own family.
Until Grandma.
She was the only one who saw me.
Really saw me.
And she protected me the only way she knew how. My father stood up abruptly. "So that's it? You're going to let us go to prison? Let your brother and sister have criminal records? Destroy the family?" "I didn't destroy anything," I said, standing to face him.
You all did that yourselves.
You stole. You lied. You hurt someone who trusted you. Those are your choices, not mine. Please, my mother begged. You could ask them to drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding.
It was theft.
$380,000 worth. For 5 years. From an elderly woman who loved you. She had plenty of money, my father shouted. "That's not the point." I shouted back, my control finally breaking. "The money isn't the point. The point is that you saw her as a resource instead of a person. Just like you saw me as a reflection of your success instead of as an individual. Just like you taught Victoria and Marcus that love is transactional and family is about hierarchy and control. I was breathing hard, tears running down my face. You broke something in all of us. Grandma was just the only one brave enough to say it out loud. They left shortly after that. I stood at my window and watched them drive away, feeling nothing but emptiness. Despite the emotional turmoil, I had 9 properties to manage. I met with the property management company Grandma had used, a woman named Jennifer who'd worked with her for 20 years. Your grandmother was remarkable, Jennifer said as we toured the first property. She knew every tenant by name, remembered their children's birthdays, fixed things herself well into her 80s because she said it showed respect for the people living there. She never told me she did that, I said softly. She didn't like to brag, but she cared about these buildings. They weren't just investments to her, they were communities. Over the next month, I visited all 9 properties, met every tenant, heard their stories, learned which repairs were needed, which tenants were struggling, which buildings needed attention. And I understood, finally, what Grandma had been trying to tell me. These properties weren't about wealth. They were about legacy, about caring for people, about building something that mattered beyond dollars and cents. I made changes. I hired Jennifer's company to continue managing the properties. I set aside funds for repairs and upgrades. I established a hardship fund for tenants who fell on difficult times. Grandma had done this informally, but I made it official. The rental income, after all expenses and proper management fees, was about $118,000 annually. I didn't need it. My software engineering job paid well. So I did what Grandma would have wanted. I established the Machen Scholarship Fund for first-generation Asian American students. I donated to immigrant services organizations. I set up a grant program for elderly residents who needed help with housing costs. And I kept calling the properties every week, just like Grandma had. Not to check on the finances, but to check on the people. The embezzlement trial happened 9 months after the will reading. All 4 defendants, Victoria, Marcus, and my parents, took plea deals rather than face a jury. Victoria got 2 years probation and had to repay $112,000. Marcus got 18 months probation and owed $89,000. My parents, as the oldest and least culpable, got probation and owed $179,000 collectively. None of them would see jail time, but all would have felony convictions. The prosecutor called me as a witness for the sentencing hearing. I almost refused, but Mr. Patterson convinced me. Your grandmother wanted the truth told, he said. Not for revenge. For accountability.
So I went.
I sat in the courtroom and watched my family stand before the judge. Victoria looked defiant. Marcus looked broken. My parents looked ashamed. When it was my turn to speak, I stood at the podium and looked at the judge. Your Honor, these are my family members. I grew up with them. I loved them. Part of me still does. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But they hurt someone I loved very much. They took advantage of her trust, her generosity, her hope that family meant something. They stole from her while telling her they loved her. That's not a mistake. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a betrayal. I looked at my parents. My grandmother, Machen, came to this country with nothing. She and my grandfather built something through sacrifice and hard work. She wanted to pass that on to family who would honor what it meant. Instead, you taught your children to see it as something they were entitled to. That's not fair, my mother said, but the judge told her to be quiet. My grandmother protected me, I continued, because she knew I needed protecting. Not from strangers, but from my own family. Think about what that means. Think about what kind of family makes an elderly woman feel she has to protect one grandchild from the others. I turned back to the judge. I don't know what the appropriate punishment is, Your Honor. I just know that actions should have consequences. My grandmother believed that. She lived that. And she died knowing that the people she trusted most had stolen from her. I sat down. The judge was silent for a moment, then announced the sentences. Fair but firm. Afterward, in the hallway, my father approached me. Are you happy now? You've destroyed us. No, Dad, I said tiredly. I'm not happy. And I didn't destroy anything. You made choices. You're facing consequences. That's not destruction. That's accountability. We'll never forgive you for this, Victoria hissed as she walked past. I know, I said. I'm okay with that. And I was. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely okay with my family's disapproval. I stood in front of the Hawthorne Avenue duplex, the first property Grandma and Grandpa had bought in 1975. It was freshly painted, the garden meticulously maintained, the tenants happy. Jennifer stood beside me. Your grandmother would be proud.
I hope so, I said.
I know so.
You've honored what she built.
You've cared for her tenants. You've made these properties about people, not profit. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus. I know you probably won't respond, but I wanted you to know I've been going to therapy, working through a lot of stuff about family, money, values. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. Why we all did. Maybe someday we can talk. No pressure. I stared at the message for a long time. Then, I typed a response. I'm glad you're in therapy. I am too. Maybe someday we can talk. But not yet. I need more time. I sent it and put my phone away. Good news? Jennifer asked. Maybe, I said. Someday. Maybe. We walked through the property together, and I felt Grandma's presence in every corner. In the careful maintenance. In the respect for tenants. In the understanding that buildings are just structures. It's the people inside them that make them homes. That night, I sat in my Seattle apartment and wrote in the journal my therapist had recommended. Dear Grandma, it's been a year since the will reading. A year since everything changed. I'm managing your properties now. Taking care of the tenants. Honoring what you built. I understand now why you did what you did. You weren't being cruel. You were being honest. You were teaching all of us a lesson. Even though it hurt. Victoria and Marcus are rebuilding their lives. Mom and Dad are trying to make amends, though I'm not ready to let them yet. Maybe someday. But mostly I want to say thank you. For seeing me.
For protecting me.
For loving me enough to give me not just your properties, but your validation. For proving I wasn't crazy. That my feelings were valid. That I deserved to be treated with respect. You gave me more than real estate, Grandma. You gave me permission to set boundaries. To demand better. To know my worth. I miss you every day. But I feel you in these buildings. In the tenant smiles. In the knowledge that love isn't about control. It's about seeing someone clearly and loving them anyway. Thank you for seeing me clearly. Thank you for loving me anyway. Your granddaughter, Lauren. I closed the journal and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in Portland, 9 buildings stood as monuments to an immigrant woman's dream. And now they were my responsibility, my legacy, my connection to a grandmother who'd loved me enough to protect me from my own family. The phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello? Lauren? It's Uncle Wei. I tensed. Hello. I know you probably don't want to hear from family, but I wanted you to know. Aunt Lin and I have been talking about everything that happened, about how we all treated you. Okay, I said carefully. We were wrong. All of us. We let Victoria and Marcus set the tone. We let your parents criticize you without pushing back. We stood by while you were pushed out of the family. And we're sorry. I sat down slowly. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should. Because you deserved better. Because your grandmother was right about everything, and the rest of us were too proud to admit it. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you for saying that. We'd like to see you sometime. If you're willing.
No expectations.
No pressure. Just dinner. Just talking. Just trying to do better. I thought about Grandma. About second chances. About the difference between people who make mistakes and people who refuse to acknowledge them. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. That's all we can ask, Uncle Wei said. Take your time. We'll be here. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about family and forgiveness and the complicated space between them. Grandma had given me the tools to protect myself. But she'd also taught me, through 50 years of building community, that people could change. That grace had its place alongside accountability. Maybe someday I'd have dinner with Uncle Wei and Aunt Lin. Maybe someday Marcus and I would talk. Maybe someday my parents would understand what they'd done wrong. But today I had 9 properties to care for, tenants to support, a legacy to honor. Today that was enough.